thank you very much. For some of you, you're coming back after the Children's Rights Alliance annual general meeting. And for some of you, you've just come and you're very welcome to join us in the Children's Rights Alliance today while we have a topic which is we know is very important and very topical as a topical, and it is something that people do need to discuss really well. And we are going to have Liz Carolan as a keynote speaker, and then we're going to have a political panel, and we will just hopefully to shed more light on topics that are of interest to everybody. We will be asking the audience as well to take part as we go along, so hoping you'll be able to do that. My name is Noeline Blackwell, and I'm the Online Safety Coordinator with the Children's Rights Alliance. I'm delighted to see you all here. So we're going to start with a keynote speech from a keynote talk. I won't call it a speech, Liz, from Liz Carolan. Liz is an advisor and an advocate working on technology and its impact on democracy. She's held roles at the Open Data Institute, the Africa Governance Initiative, and the Institute for Government. She founded Digital Action and the Transparent Referendum Initiative. She's currently advising a number of tech and society-focused initiatives and is the publisher of the Briefing.ie newsletter. That's what she puts on her CV. She's also one of the people that I would turn to when I'm looking for where are we at with this digital world, how does it look politically, and strategically, how do we manage it? So when we were looking for someone who would be articulate, expert, interesting, and maybe a tiny touch sparky, Liz Carolan was our first choice, and we are absolutely delighted she's here. So Liz, I'm going to hand over the floor to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Noeline. That's very kind. Sparky. I'm going to take that one and run with this. So thank you for inviting me here this afternoon. I'm very appreciative of the work that the Children's Rights Alliance does. So Noeline asked me, as she said, to speak kind of broadly on issues of AI and accountability, which is good because that's kind of my area, not necessarily the children's rights angle on this. But I do have a massive vested interest in this area. And that vested interest's name is Sally, and she is 5. And I had her during the pandemic lockdowns, and I had no idea what I was doing. So my phone was my window into the world in the lockdowns. And as someone who loves technology, but I've also been working in and around it for a decade and a half at this stage, I just felt confronted with these trade-offs that felt very unfair. So she wouldn't sleep, and I wanted to use these amazing sleep tracking and leap tracking apps. But why did I have to give all of her personal information, all of my personal information, to be able to use them without me really understanding where that information was going? I also really needed a community of other people in a similar situation. But why did it feel like all the online spaces had to come with these highly targeted, relentless ads, and the algorithms that were pushing me just this relentless stream of misinformation or dodgy information on everything from vaccines to something called nipple confusion, which apparently I had to worry about. My daughter is now, she's just finishing junior infants, and I'd love to, there's always that little box on a form to tick to say that the photo of her from her school tour or from Lego Club or whatever it is can go on the school website. She'd love to see herself there too. But I won't tick that box because I know that last month in the UK, schools, photos from a school were taken, put through an AI image generation tool, and they were used to generate CSAM using the faces of the children on that school website. These photos were then used to try and blackmail the school into giving them money so that they wouldn't be published. So my daughter's beautiful little cherub face is only ever going to be a blur of pixels when it's in public. And when I look ahead too, I see this Faustian bargain, like it doesn't look any different. Like I'd love her to be able to like text me to say, I just got off the Lewis, or look up the cinema timetables on her own device when she's bigger. But I know that if things continue the way they are, that freedom that she could have will come with so many risks and trade-offs, and those are things I don't need to tell anyone in this room about. And right now, like I don't know how I'm going to deal with the FOMO when she's asking me for a phone or for a device if her friends start to get one, when she wants like the normal thing. And the hardest part of this for me is that like it just didn't have to be this way. We didn't have to end up in this world. Because I'm a big technology enthusiast, I am a data nerd, but, and this is a very big but, I'm a technology industry pessimist. And probably the word pessimist isn't actually strong enough because it doesn't quite capture two things. One is this very deep cynicism I have about an industry that's just unleashed so many different types of harms on our society. And at every turn, it feels like the apps and products, they've chosen extraction, and they've bypassed both the laws and even just some of the basic human rights principles that we've spent hundreds of years constructing. And there was a very good reason why we developed things like human rights frameworks. The other thing, and frankly, I've been trying to figure out a way of putting this into words, but I feel like we're being robbed of something, that enormously useful technology is being degraded in both its usefulness and in its safety due to decisions made to try and just extract as much money from us and from the system as possible. We know what these decisions were, at least in the social media context, now that we're kind of 15, 20 years into that journey. It was about an ad-based business model that incentivizes addictive design, that built on mass data collection, and algorithms that push content that make us sad or angry, but that keep us scrolling and looking at ads. And it just feels like corporate leadership of these companies are robbing us daily of the enormous potential of this technology. And more than that, it feels like they're robbing us of the potential of human ingenuity. And this is happening, to my mind anyway, again, with AI. Because the tech itself, it's being created by kind of our best technical minds, and it could solve so many problems, but it feels like any benefits are going to come with too many trade-offs, just too much extraction. We're left feeling cheated, and that the value of any app that we sign up for just dwindles and diminishes as the costs mount. And then when you turn around and look to go somewhere else, the alternatives aren't there. I was on the radio recently, and somebody texted in the show and said, listen, a friend of mine, every medical letter that comes through the door, he's putting through a chatbot. Is that a good idea? And I would love to be able to say, yes, absolutely. If that helps you navigate a tricky time, translate technical information into something that you can understand, what an incredibly valuable tool. But we don't live in that world, because these tools are not being built in ways that serve us, or that at a basic level protect our privacy. And just as an illustration of that, a lawyer in the UK recently lost attorney-client privilege because she fed her notes into a chatbot. And the courts considered these systems to be so porous and so not privacy safe that they said that what she did was equal to putting her confidential notes on the internet. So the tools are not being built in ways that put our human rights at their center. Like, how else do we end up with a kind of mass-released image generation tool synthesizing non-consensual sexual imagery of women and children, these so-called nudification apps? And here's, it's not that this is some quirk of who happened to end up leading the major tech companies, as much as I would love to lay all the blame at the feet of an Elon or a Mark or whoever. To me, this is about a specific set of market conditions. It's an economic system that we, and decades of lax political leadership, have let be created that means that it's only the Marks and the Elons and the Jeffs that come out on top and that capture all of this incredible human inventiveness that we want to benefit from. What do we mean by that? So in a technology marketplace, the winner takes everything. If you want to be a successful tech company, you have to grow and to dominate. You have to be Google, Facebook, or Amazon. You do not want to be Ask Jeeves, Bebo, or Pets.com. If you want to get ahead, you have to reach a scale where you have what they call network effects, where you're able to capture everything and to reach monopoly status. So you have to stay ahead of your rivals for long enough, or you simply get kind of acquired by another one. That's what happened to Instagram, WhatsApp, and lots of others along the way. So it's that, or you just kind of wither. You end up as Ask Jeeves. And to be dominant, so companies like Facebook or Google, they have to lose money for a very long time. In Amazon's case, I think they lost money for a decade, while undercutting and therefore sort of like eradicating your competitors. To cash flow that, you need to promise your investors that once you have market dominance, you will extract limitless profits from people who are trapped inside your ecosystem. And at that point, it's not just enough to make a profit from your business, which I don't think any of us necessarily object to, but it's that investor who gave you money, normally venture capital, they have made 10 bets knowing 9 of them will go bad. 9 of them will be your Pets.com and they'll wither on the vine. So the one that wins has to win huge. And so this is why, when we all first started downloading delivery apps, it was great because you got €10 off your pad thai or your chipper or whatever. Because that's when the app was being bankrolled by venture capital. And it's why now these same apps, we see, well, there's a fee and there's another fee and there's another fee. And if you talk to the restaurants, they're also getting like a 25% fee or another fee because everyone is trapped and the pound of flesh is being extracted. And so AI is just kind of repeating this trend. We're at a different phase of the cycle. And it may even be kind of like supercharging it. So all those 1990s startups that turned into tech giants, they really were able to get going in a garage like Amazon or a dorm room. Mark Zuckerberg loves to talk about his dorm room, or in the dorm rooms. That was before they brought in that investment that enabled them to kind of hang on while the competition fell away. But the barrier to entry of building AI models is different. It's in the kind of hundreds of billions of dollars. So just to give you some numbers, Bloomberg estimates that this year it's probably $750 billion with a B dollars that's going to be invested in data centers. McKinsey estimates that by 2030, which is only really 4 years away, we're looking at about $7 trillion. So this is sort of what you need to be a player. And we do hear a lot about AI SMEs and startups. And in a way, some of the deregulation discourse that I know you were writing about, Noeline, some of that deregulation discourse can kind of center on them. But the reality is that it's only going to be the biggest players who get on top and who win this race. And smaller companies are either going to be acquired, and for a lot of companies, that's kind of their goal, and it makes sense at an individual level. They're either going to be acquired, or they'll just become customers of the bigger AI firms. So they'll just be building on top of that stack at whatever costs are decided on. And so when we think about AI, there's sort of 3 main inputs to like ongoing inputs when it comes to sort of AI. There's compute, energy, and the data. And so the compute is the chips that make up the data centers. These are in relatively short supply and go for lots of sums of money. And actually quite a lot of that investment that we hear in data centers, a lot of that is going into this compute power, although I cannot find out the percentage because it is, it is not made publicly available. The energy we know about, we talk a lot about sort of electricity use. But the last one is the data. And so what do we mean by the data that feeds this? We mean the entire history of human knowledge production and creation. We're talking about like whole libraries of books, movies, every Twitter post, cartoons, every Google search, newspaper articles, YouTube videos, your Facebook photos, a Reddit query, a blog post, a painting, that e-birthday card that maybe you sent somebody 15 years ago, X-ray scans, academic journal articles, photos on a school website, and in all likelihood, the entries that we put into and that I put into those baby apps in the middle of the night. It is all of what human minds have ever produced, and it's been gathered and fed into AI models in order to create these tools. And a colleague recently pointed out to me that the AI industry has decided that of these 3 inputs, it only wants to pay for 2. It'll pay for the chips, it'll pay for the energy, it will not pay for the sum total of human knowledge. That, for the most part, it just took. So in practical terms, what does this mean? It means, for a start, I believe, that we need a kind of a step change in how we think about our data. We've come around to this idea that our data is used to market to us. You know, if you're not paying, you're the product, that kind of thing. We now need to update our thinking so that we factor in how our data, I mean our content, our photos, our emails, our voice, how it is and could be used in order to create AI tools, and how it can be misused by these tools too. We already discussed the idea that children's photos online can be used to generate CSAM, but our voices can also be copied to place fraudulent claims, claiming we're in trouble and we need money to be sent through. In the workplace, this can mean, as it does now for Meta employees, that every click is being recorded in order to create a robot that's going to replace your job. In my work, I do quite a bit of kind of writing. As Noeline mentioned, I have a newsletter, but I also write for the Irish Times. And the Irish Times will pay me to write something, and then Claude or ChatGPT or Google or whoever will take it, summarize it, and will feed it back to the person. And that puts a distance between the person reading the article and the Irish Times. The Times doesn't get the traffic, so it doesn't get ad revenue. And then they also don't build that relationship with the reader so that can lead to a paid description. And there's quite a few cases going on about this that I'd be happy to sort of get into, but if the trend continues as it is, how are they meant to keep paying their writers and their journalists to let us know what's going on in the world? And how do we ensure that journalism as a whole has a viable business model? So we need to start thinking about what this means for how we manage our own data, for how data is governed, but also I think for what privacy can mean in 2026. I don't have any answers on that one. I think there are also questions for how we understand the value of our data and who benefits from it in a new AI data economy that we don't yet fully understand. I do think there are things that we can do at a community level too. Like, I agree with the Children's Rights Alliance that banning children from social media is probably going to be both ineffective and fails to deal with some of the root causes. But I do think we can take back more agency, and I love seeing kind of schools or friend groups agreeing collectively to do things like delay smartphones and trying to reduce some of that FOMO pressure that's on kids if their parents are the kind of lone holdout in a friend group. And I also think at a community level, and I'm sure you're all doing this, but it's thinking about freedom from technology, or this idea of the play-based childhood, as a right that we want children to have equally, so it doesn't become a kind of luxury that further entrenches social and economic divides. A friend recently brought her daughter to the doctor, and she had the usual sort of bruises and all the rest. And he was waiting for some sort of comment about this, and he's like, "It's the kids who don't have bruises that I worry about. It's because they're probably sitting in front of a screen all day and not playing." But the truth is that we aren't going to get to enjoy the kind of technological world that we want from just individual or community actions. The scale of the issues that we're dealing with here are at a political level. And what I would like to see, so where I would like to see things start is at the level of a political vision for what kind of tech world it is that we want. And I don't want to pick on the social media bans too much, but to me that they don't show the kind of level of political vision that we need. And when I say political vision, there's two kind of examples that are always in my head, and they're from other fields. And so one of them is like in pollution, and we came up with the precautionary principle. So it's an idea that shifted how we think about a company's responsibility to our environment. The idea that a business had to presume something was harmful until proven otherwise. So you didn't just wait for fish to die from whatever it was that your factory dumped in the river. You checked it was safe before you did the dumping. I also think of DNA sequencing. And in the late 90s, it became apparent that technology would allow us to sequence the entire human genome. Just this absolutely invaluable piece of intellectual property that could and has unlocked whole new areas of science and medicine. A private company set out to try and do this first, really aggressively, because they wanted to copyright. They wanted to own the building blocks and the code on which human right is written, so they could license it and profit if anybody wanted to use it to do any science or develop any medicine. And so the Wellcome Trust, a UK charitable foundation, and eventually the US government came in on this as well, they decided to beat them. And they decided to get there first and make this knowledge open to science as a public good. And they did, and they won. And it was because of this vision, it was the Human Genome Project. I'm slightly obsessed with it, I could go on about it all day. But it's because of that that we have all these new drug treatments for everything from MS to Alzheimer's to cancer. Actually, I found this morning a 2021 study that I think 2/3 of all new drugs from the previous year there were built by, using this invaluable sort of piece of intellectual property. I'm not saying that either of these two examples are analogous to AI, but to me, they speak to this notion of kind of ideas-based leadership and a vision for how things could be. So what if instead of the policy question around AI wasn't something like, how does AI or how can AI increase our productivity? But what if we ask questions like, how can we ensure that this incredible feat of human ingenuity is harnessed for human benefit? So what do I think can happen now? This is the sparky bit. I'd like to see our elected representatives start to look at these issues, the issues around AI and corporate power, around AI and accountability, as an issue of corporate power, as about the state's responsibility to ensure that the products in our economy are designed safely and that companies adhere to our laws, they incorporate human rights principles into product design, into their business models and how they operate. To do this, we need our political leaders to separate out the technology and the ideas around the technology from the industry. And I don't see enough of that. There's a very strong story being told about how AI will fix all of our economic problems. But it's often spoken about as if it's some sort of like unstoppable force of nature, like a new industrial revolution, very abstract sort of terms. And I feel like if I was a political leader, I would be being sold relentlessly the idea that less regulation is needed, not more. And that despite all the evidence from the past 2 decades of the tech companies that rise to the top, running amok over our laws, our norms, and our values. I was in Brussels recently on a trip to go and meet with people in the Parliament and the Commission ahead of the Irish presidency. And just the near constant refrain from everybody was, we're afraid of being left behind. Like, it sounded like I think if you had a preteen that didn't have a phone and all their friends had the phone, like that was the tone that we were talking about. It's like FOMO is driving these decisions of monumental importance for how the next 20 to 50 years of our economy and our society are going to play out. There's just this genuine belief that AI will be a catch-all solution for economic growth and productivity. But this has been the tenor of the relentless stream of marketing and lobbying by the industry. So if we think of OpenAI, who make ChatGPT, they released their kind of company records and they're trying to go public, so they have to give us a bit more information, which is always fun for a data nerd. They spent $6 billion in marketing last year. And this is a company that lost $21 billion in the same year. Because here's the thing, none of these companies make a profit from their AI products. We are in the honeymoon phase. We're in the 10 euros off the pad thai phase. When I opened my Facebook account in 2007, there was no surveillance ads and there was no optimized slop to keep me engaged. This is where we are with AI. Like, we do not know how they will make money. The business model that they're going to use to repay investors is not clear, or it's not being made clear to us. We do know that these investors are going to expect a return on their $7 trillion just for data centers investment. So to me, what we need at this moment from political leaders is to feel like they have our backs and like they're on our side, and I don't always feel that, being very honest. In the face of these huge forces, I just want them to be on our side. Instead, it feels like this fear of being left behind has taken over. And the AI Act, again, you were talking about this. It's not even properly in force, and we're already planning to weaken it through the EU's simplification agenda, which is deregulation, despite what they insist upon. And GDPR and data privacy are next up in the digital omnibus kind of process. So probably in the autumn, under the Irish presidency, the GDPR and our data protection regime is going to be reopened and reviewed from a simplification point of view. I'm going to close with this. I believe that the tech industry has been a terrible steward of the incredible human ingenuity that it has captured. And I think we're all doing ourselves a terrible disservice if we equate two things, if we equate the technology and the corporations that own it. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
There we are. I think I have it. Yeah, that it. Thanks very much. Liz, thank you very much for that. Can I see, does anybody have a comment they'd like to make or any question or, yeah, would anyone like to say anything?
Hi, I'm Sharon from the Ruairí Centre. I was just stopped dead by one thing that you said. You said play-based childhood. The fact that that's even a phrase, like when I was rearing my kids, it was just freaking childhood because what they did was play. And what worries me about it is that it's the insidious creep of language that creates these concepts in our mind that makes us forget where we're supposed to be. And what you were saying about the idea of child-based or play-based childhood being like a privilege, or I'm like, where are we and how did it happen? And it's the fact, I think a key part is that the language just creeps and creeps and creeps, and we start spouting these phrases as if they are now our new reality. And I'm like, what happened to us?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I'm going to take another couple of comments and then maybe come back to you. Would you say who you are?
Oh yeah, Alex Cooney from CyberSafe Kids. That precautionary principle that you mentioned, like that's something we're really keen to see as well. I mean, it applies to every other industry. Like, why do these companies get a free pass in relation to their products? How realistic do you think it is? I mean, that's what we're advocating for at the European level. There's an opportunity with this expert panel and the report that Ursula von der Leyen might announce something more substantial around this, access and the reform that was required to get that access. But how realistic do you think that is?
Yeah, great. Could you cope with one more just before we go back? Thanks, just behind you there. Thank you.
Mick Moran here from the Irish Internet Hotline. I think one of the main problems that we have as a society, and certainly here in Ireland, is this kind of, and what a lot of politicians, have you any sympathy for them in relation to this kind of regulation versus investment or job creation? And I just wonder what you have to say in relation to that. Is there something that can be said about that?
Yeah, thanks. I'll go in order. I know play-based childhood absolutely breaks my heart. I think I got it from sort of Jonathan Haidt's world, and I think the power of that label is incredible. But I think a lot of parents are marketed. This app will help your children with literacy, and this is a fun kind of play-based thing. But the schools, the expensive schools in Silicon Valley do not allow screens, right? Simple. On the precautionary principle. So this was a big part of the very long debate that we had for the Digital Services Act and some of the AI Act, is trying to sort of bring this in, and like how it was translated. This is the best of my knowledge. Other people are more expert than me. Into say the DSA was, well, you need to do a human rights assessment sort of up front and kind of figure this stuff out. And just kind of like, I feel like we had a direction of travel which was going more towards this. I felt like Europe was sort of like just sick and tired of all of this stuff. And these kind of things, we were able to fight to get them in, despite like the levels of lobbying are absolutely insane. Like I remember meeting a Facebook lobbyist once, and they were like, "Oh, we just acquired the upstairs floor of the building for all the extra." This is about 6-7 years ago. But it's this magic trick that's been played of like, well, AI is completely different and it's going to completely transform, and you're behind and you're behind and you're behind and you're behind. Panic, deregulate. Like it really was bizarre. It was like just Brussels is a small town, right, of people who go to the same pubs and the same bars, and cultures take hold. That's not I guess to the last point, like, there is like economic stagnation is a very real worry, right? Like losing out on useful technological advances is a real worry. But I don't see a plan in that direction. I see panic, which is being capitalized on, right, by incredibly expensive lobby firms to say the answer to your problem is this. And I had people say to me in the very same breath, that this, that something would, and this is an Irish MEP, something would help SMEs if the changes to the AI Act, which are about the very, very, very large companies, like it's just, I am probably missing something very important. And I guess just to that last point, I absolutely do not envy the inheritors of our economic system in Leinster House. We are entirely dependent on foreign direct investment for the basis of our economic model. I get my child benefit is in all likelihood paid by taxes that are paid by tech companies, right? We are not in the state that the UK is in right now because we have these windfalls. There's a recognition that the windfalls could stop at any moment and are so exposed to volatility. And I do feel like we're starting, like that's recognized in our economic planning. But it's very hard to do the thing that has to be done. And it's very, to imagine what a different economy could look like, right? I also don't think that compliance or rolling over or believing threats will save you from anything. And I've talked to officials, not in Ireland, but in other countries, who were threatened by Google with, well, we're going to remove maps, right? We're going to remove Canada from Google Maps if you do this thing. Like in Australia, it was, we're going to remove this or whatever else. Like the threats are very real, and the people who we elect to represent us are under extraordinary pressures. And I do have humongous empathy, but the way out of it is to think of, well, what's a vision? What's the kind of plan that gives us the backbone that we need to be able to sort of stand up and take our human rights, our global human rights responsibilities, which we're so good at and we have such a strong reputation for in so many other areas. Like our reputation in Europe on digital on digital regulation is, it's abysmal.
I will call the political panel up now, but not before I want to say, Liz, I am really glad we recorded that, because it was filled with wisdom and knowledge and put an awful lot of great language for me anyway, and I think for others in the room, on the kind of things that have been bothering us all. So I think a huge thank you to Liz, and good luck to you with your work and everything you do. Thanks a million. So it is a big deal, the questions that we're going to raise, and we're really very grateful as the Alliance to the politicians we have here in front of us, and to recognise that it is the middle of a working week for them, and they've had to prioritise this over a whole lot of things. So I know that there is a question that some people will have to leave earlier, but I just want to say a huge thank you to you all. And whatever about the TDs that we have here today, I don't think we was done. I just want to give a particular thank you to our councillor and our deputy leader of the Green Party as well, for whom it isn't even part of your day job in some ways to have to come and do these things, but just to recognise that it's a really big commitment. But the issue is huge as well. And so first of all, where I have now, let me see, just keep my. So starting at the far end, thank you very much indeed, Deputy Ciara Chu, Deputy Malcolm Byrne, Councillor Fiona Connelly, whom I don't think I've met before, Fiona, but delighted to meet you, Councillor Hazel Chu, Deputy Paul Murphy, Deputy Ruairí Ó Murchú, and Deputy Aidan Farrelly. Actually, you ended up nearly sitting in the order in which I have you in the list, which is either that or I introduced you all wrong, in which case I'm extremely sorry. So actually I'm going to abandon the podium, otherwise you'd be kind of looking around trying to see me. So I suppose I might just start, not with Paul's question, because I don't want to give him the satisfaction. I'm only joking, Paul, yeah. But just to, I suppose, maybe just think about your reaction to what Liz was saying, or your sense of what AI with, for me, I just have to say, the thing that I got most is I will remember from now on to separate out the technology from the industry. But what I'm wondering is, what you thought about what Liz had said about where we are and where AI is and where we are going as a country. I might start with you, Ciara, if that's okay.
It's on. What is it? And thank you for the invitation. And I suppose I have an important role as chair of the Children and Equality Committee, even though I have many of my members here present as well. I suppose listening to Liz, I agree with an awful lot of what she's saying, and I think, you know, as politicians we can sometimes be pinpointed as the bad guys, and Liz was talking about, you know, this pressure that we feel. But the pressure that I feel is to the children at home, because my background is behavioural psychology. Many of us here opted to be on the different committees that we're on. Malcolm set up the AI committee because he feels really passionate about the topic. I opted to try and get onto the Disability Committee and the Children and Equality Committee. So I certainly haven't been threatened by any big tech company, and I'm not sitting in the cabinet necessarily worrying about the jobs. My job is to worry about the children, and when we put together our work programs and we have our engagements, like I would have met CyberSafe Kids on multiple occasions, and we put together our work programs, we're thinking about the children and how we can get on top of the crisis that they're facing. And it is a crisis. I think we can all agree with that. We know that there's huge amount of positivity, and the children tell us that themselves, the things that they can learn online, the connectivity, especially for, we'll say, minority groups like the LGBTQI plus community, who, you know, find many friends online, for the disabled community, who, you know, especially the non-speaking community, who assistive technology and online spaces have been amazing. But at the same time, the threats to their privacy and to their safety, for me, sometimes I have this competition in my mind. You know, there's the right to learn, right to connectivity, but does right to safety, right to privacy outwin in that argument? And that's the question when we're faced with what's the next step, what's the right decision. We're at this crisis where they have access to all of this wonderful technology, but are the risks too great? You know, when we see children potentially taking their own lives, when we see children who are losing attention spans, critical thinking, and then, you know, that next step. I'm so worried about, you know, I don't know if there's anybody in the room here that's, you know, had a Tinder baby or a Tinder marriage. When I was growing up, and it was still going to the disco, and there was that phrase, will you shift my friend? Yeah. And there was no Tinder. People met in person, and they only dated the people around them. Now people are meeting on Tinder and on other spaces, and there has been, you know, bad things but good things out of that. My next fear is, are our children going to be meeting their first boyfriends and girlfriends, and they're not going to be real? They're going to be these romantic chatbots, and then, you know, what are the effects of that? And the research is pointing in that general direction. We've 3 mics between, so is that Malcolm? Do you want me to call you Deputy?
No,
Byrne?
Malcolm.
Right,
is fine,
okay.
Thanks.
Anyone who wants to be particularly called Deputy and your family name, feel free. Cara? Okay. That last point that Ciara was making there, was that not going back to the difference that Liz was talking about between the technology per se and the industry and the demands of the industry per se and the risks that the industry are causing? What do you think in terms of our children's rights, and young people's?
So first of all, Noeline, thank you for convening this. And I know that having interacted with many of the groups here, it's critical that we have these debates, because the more debates we have on these in the public spaces, we can all learn from each other. I agreed with a lot of what Liz said. There are elements near the end I disagreed with, and we might come back to that. But I think what is critical is we've always got to see this technology as a tool. It's not a goal in itself. And it's like any tool, it's an enabler. So I always ask the question about any tool, any program, any platform, can it help me to do something more effectively, more efficiently? Will it deliver a better outcome? From the perspective of the state, and if the state is using AI in any way, can we use this tool safely and responsibly in a way that will more effectively and efficiently deliver services to our citizens? And if the answer is yes, then we should certainly look at doing it. I will say, and I get the point that's often made about, we have to keep up. This is a really rapidly changing technology. I think one of our challenges as legislators, and for all of you who are active in the space, is just how quickly things are happening. If people think about it, when OpenAI launched ChatGPT in November 2022, and we're only 3.5 years on since then, and look at even how far large language models have developed in that space. In healthcare, I mean, I'm stunned by some of the developments in terms of how AI is being effectively being used. And at the AI committee, we've had incredible examples as well in other areas. So, for instance, where UCD has partnered with Met-Éireann around being able to predict weather events far more accurately. So when we're seeing the threats of storms, rather than it happening within a 100 to 200 kilometer radius, that suddenly it can be pinpointed, yes, it's going to affect this town or this community. So there's huge benefit in all of that. But like with any new tool, there's a risk. What I would say, and I've always said right throughout history, there tend to be 3 policy approaches. This is true of governments right through history. There's the let's ban it approach. This thing is going to be a disaster, let's try and ban it. It never works because the technology will always advance. There's there's some merit in this, but let others kind of move ahead and we'll try and catch up afterwards, and inevitably people fall behind. Or there is what I think is the correct approach, that we look at embracing this technology, we decide here are the circumstances in where we will use it, and we take a lead role in it. And I think that's where Ireland and the European Union has to be. I did use that story at a particular event where a civil servant followed me and said, yeah, but Malcolm, there's the 4th approach. We set up the review group. And the problem with this technology, and I'm just going to say is, we can review, but it is moving so quickly. And our challenge, I think, is about setting out the principles. And my view has always been it's around safety by design, that we place a digital duty of care on companies that are designing programs and platforms. So before they roll it out, there are obligations that are placed on them. There is that challenge of balancing how do we support innovation with proper regulation. And I don't like this argument that regulation and innovation are mutually exclusive. In fact, appropriate regulation will stimulate and support innovation, and innovation should not be seen as a dirty word. We should be supporting sandboxes, including, by the way, sandboxes that will increase child safety and so on. And I think it has to be a partnership between government, the tech sector, and then those operating in the advocacy space.
Would you do everyone a favour and explain what a sandbox is?
Okay, so and there's different interpretation, but a sandbox is essentially where within particular parameters, it would allow a company or an organization to trial a new product or an idea. So in other words, before it's rolled out into the big market, that you're able to sandbox this idea, like play around in a sandbox with it, to develop it, to identify what are the opportunities and also what are the potential harms.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Fiona, just general reactions
I think
based
we
on
need
what you heard.
a really big sandbox, because I think with the AI, I think it's so important that adults are the leaders and we know very confidently how that we're going to use the new tools, because I think what's shocking for me, and I'm the mom of a teenager, is how fluent she is in AI compared to me. And I think that without sort of bridging that gap between learning a tool and being competent in a tool, and I think this is probably the first time where the skill set is like accelerating so quickly away from us without the proper regulations that we have to keep our children safe. And I think that while new tools are super, but our children's safety and their well-being has to be paramount to every decision that we make. It's really important. I think that once an algorithm is catching a kid and sending them a curated version of what they think their lives should be. It's really scary, and it's just too much of a high risk commercialization of childhoods. Like, I really, when you said that about children and childhoods earlier, I was like, my background is in primary school teaching, and more we're being asked to teach children how to play. So that's part of the heartbreak that I hear when you ask that question. I was like, yep, we're getting children in, and they don't know how to play, and it's our job as teachers to teach them how to play and learn and all of the other things. And I feel frustration. So I came to politics because I was asked to. I was very happy in the classroom, but I did find that in the classroom we were asked to solve all of the problems, including technology and all of that, and I feel that that's a huge frustration. Like, Labour's policy is to say we don't want smartphones in primary school or secondary school, and it's just such a wide spectrum of opinions. Like, my daughter's best friend has diabetes, and she uses that to monitor her blood sugars. So she needs one. So it's not a cover-all, and I think it's just something that we really need to be careful and get ahead of and protect children's play. Absolute has to be the priority, because play is the work of the child, and that's how they learn and figure out the world around them. And I think, like, finally, I'm in an era of our teenagers are going to the Gaeltachts, and they're coming back and being like, oh, I forgot I could just wear like bicycle shorts and an oversized t-shirt, because they've just been on the internet so much that they think they need to look like the summer I turned pretty all the time. They do not. Like, how they are is just fine. So I think we really need to be careful.
Yeah, thank you. I like that concept of fluency as well. We talk about digital literacy and media literacy. I prefer fluency, because it's not enough to just be able to read the letters. You have to be fluent in the language as well. And we also have a lot of teachers engaged with the Children's Rights Alliance, and they're forever reminding us how much we're putting on teachers as well to do. Yeah, thank you very much. Hazel.
It's funny there, Noeline, the onus there is on the user, though. And I have to ask the question, why is the onus always on the user? Why is it that fossil fuel polluters pollute every country, and we're the consumers being asked to recycle, being asked to do X, Y, and Z? Same with big tech. When they end up infringing on rules and not being regulated, and the regulation isn't enforced, we're again being told, oh, you know what? You need to protect your kids by making sure they're literate in AI, by making sure you're literate in AI. There's even so far talk about employers need to provide employees with AI literacy. Absolutely. But where are the safeguards? Where are the guardrails when creating AI models? Where is the regulation and enforcement being put? I fully welcome the Deputy's point that it is working together and trying to make sure we get the best benefit out of this tool. But let's be very careful here. This is not just a tool. It is an infrastructure at the moment. And it is, when we talk about AI, when we talk about algorithms, they are at the heart of social media. They're not just a tool of social media anymore. They're the things that control the social media. Like, there was a report by the Digital Centre the Centre Against Digital Hate in the UK, and what they found was within 2 minutes of a child being on TikTok, they were already addicted to the content. By 8 minutes, they were following really destructive content. And they also did a report where they changed a girl's name from Sarah to Sarah who wants to lose weight. And suddenly, all of these harmful material was being pushed out to that account. Again, it comes back to the fact that as much as we like to think, oh, AI is a bit of an add-on, or algorithms, you know what, we can control them. Absolutely not. Like, I'm not trying to terrify everyone here by saying, listen, Skynet is about to come get us, but it is pretty much at that stage, at this stage. And what I want this government to be is ambitious. I want them to show leadership when it comes to leading on how to tackle this. I want them to charge the Data Protection Commissioner to make sure that your big techs are adhering to GDPR. I want them to look at algorithms and look at how we control them. You look at China, and like, again, China's not really the best example when it comes to rights, let's be honest, but what they have done is that they haven't banned the algorithms. What they have done, however, is insist that certain algorithms are shut down and that certain information is not pushed to under 14s or under 16s. But here in Ireland, we still haven't shut down the auto-recommender systems. For those who don't know what auto-recommender systems are, it's within tech companies where they push out the algorithms specifically automatically. And you're supposed to be the one opting in to turn it off, when really it should be on the big tech itself. It should be on the social media companies. Like, there's this argument, I know that gentleman asked, well, you know, there's this conversation about, will it stifle and stymie foreign direct investment? Seatbelts did not kill the car industry. So food safety did not kill off food producers and food providers. Providing proper safeguards in place does not stymie innovation.
Okay, and the same issue has arisen very much for you, Paul. You have done particular work in relation to algorithms here. So what do you say at this stage of where we're at in response to what you've heard here and, from Liz and from others on the panel, in the light of your own sort of investigation into this area?
Yeah, I mean, the reality around algorithms, recommender algorithms, is horrifying. I mean, this is a room that presumably is aware of that, the kind of things that Hazel was talking about there in terms of, you know, you go into a shop, you buy a new blank mobile phone, you say you are a 15-year-old boy. Within 15, 20 minutes, you go on YouTube, you're going to be fed racist content, sexist, Andrew Tate type content. It is fed to you simply on the basis that you're identifying as a young man or boy. Similarly, if you're a young woman and you set up such an account, within minutes, you're being fed pro-eating disorder content. If you click on any of that pro-eating disorder content, then within an hour or so, basically all the content you're going to see is literally content promoting eating disorders. And it's huge business. It's about a couple of $100 million a year in ad revenue for Meta for this eating disorder content, right? So it's absolutely horrific. Everyone who's looked at it, ICCL, Hope and Courage Collective, whole bunch of academics, anyone who studied it comes back and says you should turn off the recommender algorithms for children. We introduced a bill to do that, and also to say that they should be turned off by default for adults. But then adults can choose to turn them back on again if they want, with full transparency of what they are doing. The AI committee recommended that in one of our interim reports. The Children's Committee, or the Media Committee, one of them, I think the Children's Committee recommended it. Media Committee recommended it as well. And then we had a bill to do this, and the government voted it down. The reasons given were kind of various. One was what I thought was kind of technologically illiterate points that, like, social media won't work without these recommender algorithms. We all remember, like Liz was talking about Facebook before all this, when it was your friends, and that was what it was sold you as, and you had, your feed was sold to your friends and their updates and saying what they're up to and so on, and not being fed all this stuff. And the other was the argument that, well, we need to do this at a European-wide level, which for me is always just an excuse for inaction. It's what we do on Palestine as well, as, oh, well, it'll be more effective if we do it European-wide. Yes, agreed, but in the meantime, let's act now. And Commission Oman, in their first draft report of Commission Oman, they recommended doing this. And then, and this came out of the AI committee, they were lobbied by big tech, and then it went out. And I think just in terms of the overall point, I mean, I just think we don't have to accept this idea that this technology is making our lives better. It's not. AI is making our lives worse, and that's the reality. I'm not saying there aren't particular use cases in terms of weather forecasting, in terms of healthcare, but as a whole, it is making it almost impossible for us to meet our climate targets. It is worsening the crisis in terms of mental health. It is accelerating the rise of misogyny. It is being used to kill children in Gaza. It is undermining critical thinking. It is undermining our education system. I just think it's okay to kind of step outside of the bubble and say, wait, this is not actually a good thing. It's been pushed by big tech corporations. They have governments largely in their pockets, and it's time for people to shout stop and to say we as a society should get to choose what we're using our energy for, what new innovations are being used, as opposed to just being dragged along by the big tech companies who are making money from this. And it's the one point that I just would kind of nuance in terms of what Liz is saying about the separating of the industry and the technology, because I'm actually not sure if you can. I think the values of the industry, which are deeply anti-humanist, are embedded in the technology. You know, they're not two separated thing that you can get the technology and we just have the good parts and forget the bad parts. But actually, like, venture capitalists are the ones who drive big tech investment. The vast majority is venture capitalists, and all they want is short-term share price bumps. They don't care about the welfare of our society.
Okay. I knew Liz would spark something to say. I don't agree with her. That's great. Well done. Thank you. Now, Ruairí.
Yeah.
What's your view? Just
well, my view at this point
view.
is usually to say I'm not going to repeat what anyone else said,
Yeah.
and then to repeat it. No. Look, in fairness, I do think you have to separate out to some degree in defence. When we're talking about artificial intelligence and we're talking about the large language models, and we're talking the applicability in relation to whether it's here healthcare, if we ever had electronic health records in this state, and whether that information could be used from a diagnostic point of view or could be used in relation to, you know, I suppose the big thing about artificial intelligence is it'll tell you things you weren't even looking for, and I suppose that is the idea there. I think we have to separate out absolutely when we're talking about social media and the tech companies, and because if we didn't have artificial intelligence as exists, you know, at the end of the day, recommender settings are fairly straightforward algorithms. We know what to do. And for a long time, people probably looked on Facebook and everybody favourably. You didn't look on them the same way you looked on big tobacco. You didn't look on them the same way you looked on oil companies that were displacing people in Nigerian villages. And then, all of a sudden, you discovered, you know, how this worked and what the product was. And very simply, the algorithms work on the basis of you get free entry in here, and we will throw, with these recommender settings, whatever will keep you online. And that's it. And in fairness, outside of Elon Musk, who is a particularly, what would you call it?
Interesting.
Yes, interesting and demented individual, okay? The rest of them, on some level, they don't care. They will just throw up the information. They want to make sure that nobody stops them in relation to what information they can throw up or what detail. And then obviously TikTok is like everything you saw before, only on steroids. You know, addictive by design. You don't need a huge level of research. You just need to spend 2 minutes on it yourself. You know, you don't have to hand it out to children to find out, you know, what the actual impact is. And that is the fact. And until we regulate them in a real way, they are going to continue to do this, because if they keep you online, they make money. That's how this works, right? Artificial intelligence, we need the checks and balances. Obviously, if you're given these sort of people, like if these sort of people get to use technologies with even greater power, obviously they will use it in whatever way makes money, and unfortunately what makes money has generally been detrimental to us. Now, there are huge questions in relation to AI as regards job displacement. In fairness, Paul talked about, if we're talking about the likes of Palantir and what's happening in giving the Israelis a greater capacity to kill Palestinians, obviously that is not beneficial in any way, shape or form. But what we really need there is a bit more than regulation. We need certain powers in this world to be held to account. And I get that's for a different day. Yeah. But if we are serious, and we have to start domestically, and I remember it being said at one committee meeting, I think it was actually EU Affairs, it was about the Data Protection Commissioner should have been the first office that should have been taking action in relation to this. We know that they have used our details and our information and some very, very personal information. I know people make the argument, they can only use what they've given you. But in an awful lot of cases, this was done by subterfuge for a long time. And they've used kids' information, and they have used it against them. And I refuse to believe that they are going to step back in any real safe way. We haven't seen it. Look, in fairness, they have very good spokespeople. They've all been in front of our committees. But the fact is, nothing has changed. All you literally have to do is go on Facebook, go on TikTok, go on whatever social media you want. And unfortunately, it's almost out of frustration that you're now getting conversations about banning, you know?
Yeah.
But like the fact is, we haven't been real. It took us a long time to get to this point in relation to technology. And in fairness, it's been said earlier, like, I constantly talk about the issues we have around assessments and therapies for kids with disabilities and how we need to ensure that we employ that in schools, that we involve families and everything. But one of the ways technology can actually benefit there and can facilitate and can back up is through the use of assistive technologies, while accepting, we're talking about that at the same time that everybody knows in a perfect scenario, in an educational setting, you remove screens. So I suppose it's how best we do this.
I want to come back to some of that stuff in a moment, but I'm very sorry, Aidan, I won't be going around in the same order all the time so that you end up... But just on this particular one, can I just get a general reaction from you?
When Liz was speaking, so before I became into politics, I was a youth worker for about 15 years, 16 years or so, and a social scientist in Maynooth University. And I think what struck me when Liz was speaking is I think we've probably collectively watched on at one of the sharpest evolutions of cultural norms over the last 10 to 15 years, when you can say terms like play-based childhood. I was reminded when Liz was speaking I can see it very vividly, my mother saying, if you don't behave yourself, you won't go outside for a week. Whereas now, if you don't behave yourself, you will be going outside for a week. And the sharp contrast in that, I think, has to be recognised. We've changed the way in which children are growing up, and while none of us are individually responsible, we're all collectively, I think, part of that, and I think it has to be acknowledged. Yeah. I think in terms of the points regarding political leadership, I think the frustration stems because there's a lot of low-hanging fruit with regards to existing legislation that needs to be, really laid out and enforced. But also, I mean, both Ciara and Malcolm, the work that those committees have done, if the government chose to enact the recommendations from those two reports alone, we would be in a much safer and responsible place when it comes to children. I'm often struck, what physical environment would we allow children and young people to be in that is so unregulated, yet we allow it in an online environment where we don't enforce the regulation to the same extent? We have Garda vetting, we have child protection training, we have all these things. You wouldn't be in any way a risky or precarious situation in person, so why must we allow that to happen in an online setting? We don't, and I think there's a lot of work that can happen. I must point you to the National Youth Council of Ireland's work on that AI report.
Where's Ruben?
The young people's juries, what they did.
Stand up till we see you,
Those recommendations, they're just exceptional, and they're really, really important because they platform young people's voices. I don't think we can make change without listening to them, because they are fundamentally, 1 in 3 young people, 12 to 15, have used an AI chatbot for companionship.
Yes.
Another reality that we must accept. 8 to 12 years, it's 1 in 4 children. So loneliness is a massive part in this as well. We're not seeing groups of children or young people be in a space together, collectively on the green or on the corner, playing heads and volleys or anything. That whole kind of scenario has evolved, and I think to recognise that as a starting point is quite important.
I do want to make a point. Not all children really always wanted to go out and play. There were some of us who would have loved those screens when we were young, because we were always being booted out of the house and told we had to go out for an hour before we could come back in. But just on the points that several of you have made, like, there's no disagreement here, but that we need rules and boundaries, and we need structures in place to keep children safe. And we all kind of even know what they would look like. And still we're at the point of discussing bans, which Liz mentioned are likely ineffective, as well as not getting to the root cause, for social media, where social media is now only a small part of the issue that children have to deal with, because your standard AI so-called companion is not a social media creature, it's from some other computer program. So why then is it a case that we have not put in place for AI in advance? We're reacting in relation to social media because we came to it too late. Now we have a chance with generative AI. Okay, it has moved a lot in the last 2 years, as you say, but we could surely be putting in place proper boundaries, proper regulation. And instead of that, we have a piece of EU legislation that we're simplifying and deregulating before it's even in place. Wrong. I'm going to get a no on that one in a second from Fianna Fáil over there. But we are not doing what we could do while AI is still developing. We are not putting those in place. And the bill this afternoon doesn't even mention fundamental rights agencies, which are supposed to be protecting people in this state and about which there seems to be a vast silence about how they are to manage. So why can't we do that? Now, I'm not going to go back to you first. I'll just hold down for a second and see. From this side of the house, who were last up last time, does anybody? Yeah.
Probably don't want to hear from me again twice.
Yeah, no, go. Yeah, take your chance. You might be last again the next time.
That's okay. My dad used to always say, don't ever buy a brand new car out of a car salesman, because the minute you drive it out, it devalues straight away.
Exactly, yeah.
I think a social media ban, the minute it's published, will be out of date, and given the pace of change, we have seen statistics that show anywhere between 60 to 80% of young people who had social media accounts in Australia prior to a ban still had those accounts up and running after that ban came into effect. It won't work. And what's really frustrating from an opposition perspective is, whilst we know the evidence tells us it won't work, it seems to be the only show in town in terms of being seen to be proactive in doing something, even though the impact simply won't make any child or young person safer in any online environment. We also have seen that the Taoiseach come out and say, accept almost, that we shouldn't probably be calling it a ban anymore, because we know it's more of a symbolic gesture, that we know children and young people drink, but they're not allowed to drink. The same way we'll know some children or young people will access content online, even though they won't be allowed. We can do so much more. And that's the point that I really want to emphasise. The second piece is, we just need to keep young people's voices in this conversation, because what we have allowed and facilitated is a generation of young people who rely on being online, who have made friendships, who have been part of communities online and have found so many benefits to it. We don't need a ban. The ban won't work, and we don't need to rely on our colleagues in Europe as part of this presidency to be able to show leadership. We've already heard the competency within the houses of the Oireachtas in those reports, in those on the committees. It's there. If we enacted and enforced what is already there, we would be in a much better place.
Yeah. I think, is her name Daniel Einstein, that Australian woman who was very influential in the thinking, the political thinking? Is that her name? It's something... But she seems to have said she recognises the ban isn't working well, but at least it got people talking.
So curiously, it was interesting. Liz mentioned Jonathan Haidt, who she was speaking about, who wrote the book The Anxious Generation. Yes. And what happened was, it was read by the wife of the Premier of South Australia, who was convinced that as a result, a social media ban would work. And that in turn influenced the Safety Commissioner and got political acceptance. And it was very much that classic, and there is a danger politically of what I call something must be done, this is something, we're doing it.
It's better than nothing.
It's better
is
than
the other
nothing.
bit.
And part of the problem is, the jury is still out. I don't agree with it. The jury is still out about it, and there is a review of the Australian experience, which is going to be completed for December. But it's... the problem I see is it's been seen almost as we're putting all our eggs in this basket. And what we're avoiding is a lot of the issues around, the need for education, the need for safety by design, and to look at some of those issues. Part of it has to be, and I entirely agree in terms of what Aidan said about, children's, the environment, but it's also about equipping children, in the online environment to be able to, your point about fluency, that if they feel uncomfortable, and again, CyberSafe Kids doing wonderful work in this space, they feel uncomfortable, that they feel that they can talk to a parent or to a responsible adult in this space. I do want to take you up on the regulation issue. And this is where I agree with most of Liz's points, except the simplification agenda. The simplification agenda is not about deregulation. The critical thing about any form of regulation is that it actually works, that it can be operated effectively. and particularly, obviously, at a European context for SMEs and for others, that it's able to work. I think one of the concerns, and we're going back to debate AI legislation later this evening, and in the context of the AI office, I think we have a danger if we look at trying to create an extra layer of bureaucracy or an extra layer of regulation. And why I say that is we have a lot of regulators already. My view is we should be equipping those regulators to deal with new products. So let me give you an example. If you develop, say, a financial product at the moment, you have to go to the central bank, you have to prove its purpose and make sure it's safe, and they assess it and so on. And similarly now what should happen is if it's a financial product that is simply, an AI-enabled financial product, a tech product, it should still be the central bank that should be regulating that, rather than, if you like, a second layer. And I do get a bit concerned if this idea, because it's not, and certainly Michael McGrath, as the EU Justice Commissioner, has made very clear, and he also speaks, as people know, he has 7 children, so he also speaks in that context about, the impact on his own kids. It's about trying to make sure that the regulation will actually work. I think we need to move back to, and it goes back to this issue about a digital duty of care. If I'm making a children's toy, before I put it out on the market, there's the European CE standard. There's a whole series of standards I have to go through. It's tested and so on, and then it's allowed. It's a similar type of position, and what we do is we equip our regulators who are expertise in this area to be able to make sure that if it's an AI-enabled product, that it meets those same standards.
Yeah, I will pass to you in a second, Hazel, but here's a real beef. I just don't understand how this could have happened, even under the EU AI Act as it stands, that nudification apps were not immediately recognised as things to be prohibited, and that AI companions were only limited risk in certain circumstances with minimal duties. How could that have happened at all? And where's the learning out of that? And where's someone going to actually explain to us? I don't expect you to explain it to us, but it's horrifying.
I agree with it, and it's horrific. I mean, I have a piece of legislation about the protection of voice and image bill going through the Oireachtas.
Oh yeah, great.
And I think we need to start to talk about how we protect our own digital identities. Now, I mean, it's probably because I remember working on the legislation. I just thought about, misuse for fraud and purpose and so on. You have to kind of wonder, God, how could somebody be so sick as, to misuse a child's digital identity? But unfortunately, that's the world that we have to live in. But we have to start to talk about how do we protect our digital identities, our voice, our image, our likeness.
But actually, this is the way it is right now. And nudification apps at the moment, at best for some, won't be protected until the end of this year or the beginning of next year.
December of this year.
Yeah, well, someone thinks it might be a little bit later than that. But anyway, these high-risk AI companions won't be protected until 2028.
Yeah,
earliest.
I take a view which is slightly different government view, where I think we need to shift. And I had this argument when we were dealing with the Online Safety and Media Regulation bill as it became an act. I think we need to shift to also placing personal liability on the directors of companies.
Yes.
Because my difficulty has always been, you can have eye-watering fines put in place, but they're written off as business costs. Whereas when you think about environmental legislation or labour legislation or health and safety legislation,
or GDPR,
where an individual is personally responsible, orange is the new black, you take it far more seriously.
Yeah, so that is also a recommendation in the online safety. The Health Task Force recommended first the place basis and also that criminal liability. I believe there may be a lot of opposition to it in certain circles, but it would settle people's, minds on things. Yeah, sorry, I was taking over the thing now. I thought I had you all to myself, Hazel.
I was a little worried there that Malcolm was about to say the personal responsibility is again on the user. So, which is what we heard during the Grok debacle. Let's be honest, Malcolm. Like during the Grok debacle, when it was very clear that that X and various companies that are that use AI platform for notification should be taken to task. They weren't. What happened was that there was suddenly statements made by ministers of this government to say, well, you know, is it not the responsibility of the user? And what I find really interesting is within the incoming legislation, and the Children's Rights Alliance called this out, is that children is not classified as a vulnerable class. Whereas really, if we're having a whole conversation about protecting children, why are they not classified as a vulnerable class in this legislation? Why are they not put front and center in terms of public safety, in terms of public health at this stage? And I completely get the argument that, oh, AI, it has its goods. Listen, I'm ambassador for Breast Cancer Ireland. Recently, we know that with AI, there are huge breakthroughs when it comes to cancer research. But I look at that and I balance it up against my 8-year-old and go, well, 98% of generative AI is porn at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I get that it would be great to, and I get the health benefits of screening, of using AI, but I think the cost at the moment is too massive, especially when we don't have the safeguards in place. And to have something that is saying next year protected or the following year, when we've had so many debacles that have showed the detriment of AI. We saw it with Facebook with the notification apps. We then saw it with Grok and images, and we had plethora of teenage girls coming, being very brave and showing themselves in front of the camera, saying how they had to be subjected to this. Yet all of a sudden, when it came to legislation, they weren't even part of the protected class. And I find that really quite horrifying.
So if and I might be misreading it, but this is where all the Oireachtas members can help, is that the general scheme of the AI bill mentioned vulnerable people, didn't mention children, but mentioned vulnerable people. I don't see it in this legislation at all. So it's an opportunity maybe to bring it back up there. But thanks, Hazel. Ruairí, did you want to come in?
You're not going to get a huge level of disagreement on any of this. Look, we had the guards in front of the committee in relation, you know, not very long after the whole Grok incident. And all right, there's two things, because like on some level you cannot understand how somebody wasn't at the front door of Twitter. And again, like it has been said by many people before, you know, there has to be responsibility at a corporate level, or this doesn't matter. But even with, and again, the guards also pointed out, obviously, that there are gaps in legislation that need to be followed up on. It's a bit more straightforward when it was obviously it was images that related to children, but when it was images that related to adults, you know, that there was no clarity in relation to it. And then anybody that's talked to any kid or adult and who's had an issue then with material that's created and put online, like, the companies will come in and tell you, oh, we operate like with far greater due diligence than the law.
That's right.
We nearly remove it before it's even there. But the fact is, you will have multiple cases of people who will talk about how long it took to get something down, to a degree that it's been copied and pasted and, you know, re-recorded and sent everywhere a million other ways. So, and while we need to have rules and regs, and when you're talking about, like, we're talking about obviously artificial intelligence in relation to vulnerable people, like we need to look at the whole set of rules and regs that cover the entirety, going back to social media, in relation to what information they can use and cannot use that relates to vulnerabilities that we all have, and then particular vulnerabilities that relate to children. But we haven't got serious about this in any way, shape or form. I get it that we have been late to the game in the sense of, you know, the impact that social media had, the impact it has on children's brains, the impact it has in relation to how we operate and how we play. And to a degree, we were taken by the benefits in the beginning. But we are seeing a wholesale onslaught, particularly on children at this point in time, and we really need to get proper grips in relation to it.
I think it was you, Ciara, mentioned at the start about the importance of recognising that for some groups, or maybe Fiona, I think it was you said it, for some groups, that social media, in fact, is a lifeline for children. It was you, I think, yeah. Children with disabilities, sometimes rural children, LGBT children, and the rest of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, accepting all of that, can I just go back to, because I feel some of you are going to leave me soon, I want to go back to Paul and see, do you want to pose your question again, Paul? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Noeline, and thank you for the political representative's very valuable contribution. I suppose just one question I would have is, if there was a list of 10 things we needed to do to protect children, what are those? Why are we failing to bring those into place? Okay, sorry, five.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are going to have to look at that, because there are the risks to children, but we don't want children to be punished for the harm. Yeah, so Ruairí.
I was just going to say, in relation to children, anytime we've had young people in, the first thing they say is, here, you're worried about the impact this is having on children. They say, look at the impact it's having on adults, right? We know there's a wholesale that we need to teach people the critical analysis, right? It's absolutely lost. Look, we know people who we thought were sensible who've gone down rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole.
Yes.
Yeah. No.
All of us.
No, yes, to a degree, but every now and again you at least say this mightn't be true, and I need to pull myself back from this. But here's the thing: we are talking about information, misinformation, and disinformation that the social media companies can put up, and a recommender algorithm that puts it in front of you. So it's back to the same thing that we were all saying earlier. The responsibility has to be on them, the leverage has to be against them, and that's the only way they will be brought to book, or otherwise this will continue, and we will make an attempt to protect children, but children will get on the adult streams and they will see what we see, and we all know that the impact will not be good for many.
Yeah, great. Ciara.
My brain is spinning with
all
the discussions.
I nearly asked you 3 questions in a row. Answer anything you like.
I sometimes I have an answer, and then the conversation changes. But I think, like, the biggest thing that I keep coming back to. So I don't know if I can still call myself a new TD, because we're 20 whatever months in now. But the biggest thing that I'm seeing is things move slowly in the Oireachtas and in Europe, and even Deputy Farrelly is talking about the fantastic report that the Children's Committee did. That report is not out yet, because we had to do all the meetings, then we have to draft the report, then the committee will have to agree the report, which will probably take us 2 days, because I can't rush it through, because Deputy Farrelly might want amendments, or so somebody else might, and then we push that through, and it has to get to the minister, and then the minister might consider. So things are slow, and it's so frustrating when you can see, okay, we need this legislation now, or we need this regulation now, and everybody in this room is probably, we're all here at the Children's Rights Alliance. We all have children at the forefront of our mind. But if you go back to pornography, and we see the level of gratuitous violence now within it's all violent, and there's so much of it that is promoting, incest relationships and all of that. I guarantee you tomorrow, if we try and push through, which we should, try and push through mandatory age verification for pornography sites, it's like everybody in this room will probably agree, but the regular people in society, there'll be a huge pushback on that. Now, I'd still be for putting in, mandatory age verification on pornography sites. I'm all for putting in mandatory age verification on social media. And I think we should do that. At the moment we have an app that's been trialled, but we have to have a digital wallet in by the end of the year. I, for one, can't wait to have my passport and my license and whatever else on my phone. I'm sure Paul Murphy is cringing at me saying that, but we give away so much of our data anyway. At least if I have it there, I won't lose it myself. But what I'm trying to say is, as soon as we put for myself, I put up a couple of posts on social media saying this is open to consultation, whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's open to it's open to consultation. You don't even have to download the wallet and take part to give your opinions. But yes, there's going to be a trial phase of this age verification wallet, and the level of pushback was phenomenal. So the people in this room are convinced. And there'll be a certain amount of the Oireachtas that will be convinced, and there'll be a certain amount of Europeans that will be convinced. But there's always an amazing amount of pushback. So just to come in, and I'll finish. Two more things. Grok brought the notification apps into the mainstream discussion. Yes. Before that, there was a few of us that were talking about Candy AI and other notification apps. When I released my online survey in November from 2,000 parents, Grok wasn't even launched at that point. You know, we now have robot hoovers and robot lawnmowers that weren't a thing 10 years ago. What's going to be the next thing and the next thing? Legislation and regulation we need, and that's our job, and it will move slow, but we also need empowerment and education, because we can't stop it. So we really need to invest in organisations like CyberSafe Kids, WebWise, Hotline is there.
Children's Rights
Alliance, you know, NYCI, but as well for older people, people with disabilities, because no matter how much we get on top of these algorithms, or the AI chatbots, or whatever, the next thing is coming down the road that we haven't even thought of yet to legislate.
But I thought that was an interesting point about the central bank, and you're also good. I've forgotten who was it, the central bank? Your point, Malcolm. I'm old enough to remember the recession, the financial recession of 09-10, and how it was shown that actually we didn't have enough regulation even after a century of regulation, because the banks were behaving irresponsibly and we needed more. So we'll always need, but we can go a stage up from that. Deirdre Kenny from 1 in 4 is down to get in with a point of information, are you? Or is it a question? Point,
So we work with adult survivors of child sexual abuse, and it's probably obvious to point out that there are huge parallels between the tech institutions and the institutions of the past, and how we didn't protect children. And it's really frustrating to sit here and listen to what we don't know. We know already we have a new commission about to start, and I will tell you now, it'll be we knew and did nothing. So here we are again having the same conversation, we knew and did nothing. And I suppose I can see in hindsight of working in this for 20 years that we didn't invest in prevention. None of us understand, well, maybe we do in 1 in 4, but we don't understand sexual abuse enough. We don't understand what it takes to prevent it. So if you're going to try and protect children online, you have to understand the issue first. You have to get ahead of it. Of course, tech companies are always going to know better. They're always going to innovate. They're always going to get ahead. But you and we don't understand what we are trying to protect children from. And what worries me at the moment is we have adult survivors coming forward about their experience 20, 30 years ago. Child survivors have not yet started to come forward in the same way, and we don't understand what they have been exposed to. And that will blow our minds, and we'll have another commission in 10 or 15 years' time that will tell us things that we knew and did nothing about.
I'm a terrible chair, because you were all asked to do 1 to 5 things and I didn't let you, but that was worth it. No, that's fair enough. I mean, I think that level of frustration is fair enough. Paul, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, because I do have to run back to do statements on Pride in the Dáil. It relates to your point, and also in terms of the question of regulation, right? Because the parallel with the financial crash was the financial regulator wasn't just into regulating. Also their mandate was to promote financial products and so on. But if you look at the AI bill that's in the Dáil today, the AI office that is being set up similarly has a dual mandate. So one is to protect people, but the other is to promote AI literacy and innovation. And that's like poacher, gamekeeper at the same time. You know, that's building in a fundamental problem in terms of, is their job to promote? And okay, there's some risk involved, but we need to promote, we need to get, you know, and so in terms of like, the role of a regulator should be to protect children, protect everybody in society from this technology. And there's plenty of other people who are into pushing the innovation and so on. The other final thing I wanted to say was in relation to, because I agree with Malcolm on the like, this social media ban being, we need to do something, this is something, right? I agree with that like, the government is under real pressure from parents who are despairing at their kids just trapped in social media, and they can see the impact it's having on them in a terrible way, right? And it's a good thing that parents recognize that, and the government's trying to respond to that. But I think it's interesting, because it's not just here's something, because there are other somethings. I mean, we had our bill in terms of banning recommender algorithms. So why is this something rather than a different something? And I think the reason it's this something is because this is a something that on the one hand looks like radical, decisive action, but on the other hand, I think it's something that the big tech companies can live with.
They can live with it.
Because they allow, we all pretend the kids aren't on it, even though they're still on it, and then we can do whatever we want. We don't have to regulate what continues to happen on social media for adults and so on. And I think that's why they have gone for this something. It's a bit like sometimes big fossil fuel companies, sometimes they're in favor of some sort of climate action because they know that there's pressure on them to do something. So they choose the thing that's not really going to have an impact and means that their basic business model can continue. And I think that's another one of the problems.
I think this is the first bunch of politicians I've met who don't think the word ban is the most gorgeous word in the world and that it solves all your problems. Yeah. No, just a second now. Yeah. Oh, yeah, just a second.
Yes. Yes. I'd ban recommender algorithms.
Yeah. And he put in that legislation. No, hold on a second. Fiona's been trying to get in for a good while. And then I'll go to the audience.
I was keen to give
unruly audience, yeah.
I was keen to give Paul one of the 5 things that
we do. Oh, yes,
do,
thank you.
The image that comes in my head is like getting your teenager into town safely on the bus. And it's like we look after their physical safety, their mental safety, their strangers. But getting your kid into town on the bus, there's the rules of the road, there's all the other expected norms from society that are legislated for it, there's the Gardaí, there's the traffic lights, all of those safety measures are put in, but when we're getting our children online, there are no safety measures. Yeah. And someone said earlier, like it's 2 minutes, 8 minutes, an hour. Paul, did you say that? Did you give the times? And they are so seriously scary that it happens that quickly. So you don't have any chance to mentor them to get the bus into town or mentor them to get onto the internet safely or to use, if it's not social media, AI, all of those things, because it happens so quickly. But I am that keen on a ban because I feel like maybe, I take everyone's point. But as one thing about the ban, in its just to speak positively about the language around the ban, it does give some agency to me as a parent where I'm like, well, look, this social media platform is banned in Australia, so we're not going to be downloading that on your phone. So there is some of that backup that parents really desperately need.
So is that your one thing that you would do for children?
Training. The bus. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like a bus into town. I would like training wheels where we can have legislation to help them on.
Okay. Yeah. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the audience. Yeah. Now, you'll have to wait, Alex, a little while, and so will Sharon. I'm going to take new people, and not everyone has to be from Cork, all right, but we'll start with... So can you put your hand up if you'd like to make a comment, and if you can keep them as quickly as possible. Alex, go. Yeah, go to Charlotte there. Yeah, all right, okay.
Hi, my name is Fiona Murphy from the...
I'm not sure it's...
From the Irish Association of Social Workers, and one of my key concerns around protecting children in relation to AI is how services to children and young people are using AI themselves. We are the adults in the room. We need to set an example. We need to become expert ourselves and not be novices when it comes to AI. And I'll give you one example of getting ahead, which was brought up by 1 in 4. Is in relation to the use of AI to transcribe notes. In the UK, social workers in some areas are using AI to transcribe notes. What it does, it can develop time efficiencies. It doesn't necessarily translate into benefits for the public. As we know, AI is unaccountable. It reproduces bias. It reproduces racism, and it further creates inequalities. That's something that we haven't spoke about here already today, and I think it's really important. AI serves to further marginalise communities that are already marginalised. So as the adults in the room, I would challenge you all to become critically aware, to learn more about the use of AI, and to look at how, for example, TUSLA has no leadership currently. There are no plans for the use of AI within TUSLA. And while we know from other jurisdictions that there is shadow use by social workers of AI. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
No, that's a really important point. I would just say, in terms of the AI bill that's coming before the Dáil and before the Oireachtas now as well, that's why it's so important that there be a representation from children somewhere on the AI board, and that the fundamental rights agencies that are supposed to be protecting the rights of people are in some way engaged in that AI office. Malcolm.
No, I want to come in because I'm also to, and it's to come back on a couple of points. So very clearly, and it's something that we do want to see a youth advisory panel. It's something I'm very strong on. We got it with regards to Commissioner Mann as part of the the online safety legislation, and I think we will certainly see on that. I slightly disagree with Paul because it ties into your point around, I actually think part of the role of a regulator has to be around literacy and awareness building. I think a regulator's role can't just be about, thou shalt not. It has to also be about enabling and building a bigger understanding. I might throw one slightly controversial view, because when we talk about AI, it's kind of general. When we're talking about generative AI, and there's large language models and small language models. One thing that I will say though is that I think that there is the potential with some of the large language models about moving much more away from the polarization and towards democratization and more accuracy. Because if people think about when you use an LLM, to draft or to prepare something, you want it to be as accurate as possible. You'll dismiss, and I get that there's still a problem with hallucinations and so on, but the LLMs are getting better and better. And a lot of it is because of data in, data out. And our expectation is that we will want to continue to see the quality of those models actually improve. Now, there's a huge technology that... Yeah, but I'm actually going to say, but that's on. I want to say that, but that's on the basis of, because what it does is it reflects the data that's put into it. I entirely agree with you.
It doesn't just reflect the data put into it. I'm sorry.
And if
1 second. Sorry.
But we will. We as citizens will want it to be more.
Malcolm, thank you. But it is slightly controversial, and Hazel is going to.
Can I just challenge that point on data put into it and a learning model? So the reason I brought up that 98% of generative AI produce pornography
of deep fakes.
Of deep fakes, but also then to Cliona's point, depending on the AI model you're using and what they have seen in terms of your viewing, in terms of your data that should really be kept safe, but it's not. They produce a certain answer that is actually more beneficial to what the company they have is selling. Like a perfect example is Belfast riots and...
I'm just going to stop you there because you're right, but we're descending into quite a technical argument that I am going to lose my space in a minute. So I'm going to stop it because I have this mic. But what I will say is this, that point of discrimination is really important, and the AI office, as it's suggested in the bill, has nothing to deal with that. How does it deal with the actual fundamental systemic flaws of AI? Yeah, Charlotte, thank you. Sorry, I'm going to move you all on now, and you'll have to be fast as well.
Hi there, Charlotte from Good Shepherd Cork, working with homeless families. But I suppose I just want to step a little bit back out of the very specifics of this and the context of the society and the world in which AI and technology lives in. And, there's, again, this need for cross-governmental approach. Like, we're here now, we're talking about AI regulation, we're talking about safety, but yet curriculum reform is moving at a vast pace with classroom-based assessments, with all children requiring the need of a laptop or a device. Just 3 children last week across different schools, a first-year student, a fourth-year student, a second-year student, that I came across in work, are required to have a device going into school next year. So we got rid of the cost of school books, but we brought in the cost of laptops for putting children online. Why can't we go back to the old-fashioned way of learning? So there's that. In one move, we're trying to regulate, but in another move, we're putting a laptop or a screen in front of every child. The other thing I'd say, the people most at risk of using incorrectly or being exploited by technology are vulnerable, disconnected people in our society. Children in poverty, children in homeless accommodation, children of families who are struggling. And what can they do when they're inside in a room the size of a box and they've 4 children? They're going to give them a device. And has that mum or has that dad who's struggling to feed, work, and God knows what her children, time to check up all the parental controls? Can they even keep ahead? Parents who may not have had an education. So
may not have the language.
May not have the language.
Yeah.
So the world in which we're living has such an impact to allow the exploitation, and I suppose, you know, profit is made on vulnerable people and a dysfunctional society. So.
And I do think that's the magic of these meetings.
I might
is
come in
where you
because
hear views. Yeah,
I
thanks,
need to
Ciara.
leave after this with Malcolm, not because I don't want to stay, but because
yeah, no, you've been great. Thank you very much, all of you. Yeah,
that actually came up in the engagements on online safety, but also we're just after completing, you know, child poverty and deprivation, and we've a report coming out, and that, you know, it came up even when, now we're looking at technology, but it came up even with, you know, TY experiences, and this being like, oh, everybody's going to Italy or everyone's going to Paris, and some, you know, some children are not able to afford to go, and then they're bullied and penalised, and we're seeing that again now with phones and with devices, and so I fully support that delay as much as you can until you get to secondary school, and if a school requires a laptop, that should be provided. But when you talked about cross-governmental approaches, I'm really starting to see that on this topic. So we would have been concerned within the AI committee that the AI minister was under the Department of Enterprise. But then we looked, we'd say, Department of Education, Hildegard, investing in WebWise and asking for, I think you mentioned, Fiona, teachers feeling overwhelmed. You know, you see all the time these outside school workshops with corporate people giving training. So that investment into WebWise within the schools has to happen, where they're going be able to go in to support teachers who are feeling overwhelmed with the curriculum. We look at the online health task force that was just published. So the Department of Health actually have a budget now to go out and do a national campaign, because it isn't just children who are affected, it's older people as well. And even the cohort of people in their 60s and 70s who didn't necessarily grow up with devices, who are finding it more difficult to disseminate what news is real and what's AI. So it's really important that that's over the Department of Health. But I think I would like to see a little bit more within the AI office, as you say, Noeline, like children have a risk there of being not focused on enough. I was at a meeting last week about the EU presidency, and it was on the global and tech agenda for our EU presidency. And if I hadn't been in the room, I don't know if the voice of children would have been brought up.
There you are.
So it is important that in phase 2, we try and get that recommendation in, so that there is
try and get
children's voices
on a systemic level. Yeah, and it's not just the device that goes in, Charlotte, it's the programs on the device as well. No licensing, no obligation. Alex.
Just quickly.
Thanks very much indeed. Sorry, I'm very sorry now that she'll be cross with us, and she'll have a point.
I will, I'll give out.
She'll get you again though, Malcolm, I can assure you, and Ciara too. Yeah.
Just a point you made, that a lot of what was being discussed was...
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah,
was reflected in that online health task force recommendations.
Yeah.
And the basic premise behind that online health task force was to consider whether this was a public health issue. We had the Taoiseach coming out last week saying it was a public health issue. It was the public health issue of our time. But we're not investing in it as a public health issue. So I think, you know, I suppose my question to you is, do you see it as that? And then what resources do we need to put into responding to it as a public health issue?
Yeah, and Ruairí.
Yeah, look, it 100% is. But when you're talking about, and in fairness to the point before, around, you know, vulnerable children, like, it's not only in relation to technology that we've been failing vulnerable children. Like, we are really bad in relation to, you know, the early intervention pieces that are needed. Right, that there are kids that are making bad decisions and don't necessarily have the critical analysis and are being left in front of phones. There's also kids that are doing drug runs at, you know what I mean, at 11, 12, even from 7 and 8. So we're not dealing with the half of this. Like, on some level, we need to have a real conversation about what the issues are that are impacting on society. And I'm not saying that we can offer utopia, but I think we can at least ask the real questions. And you're right. None of this matters. We could put a perfect plan together. We could all sit down here and put 160 recommendations down. But unless you have the resources to follow through on them, it won't matter at all.
Or is it that unless you allocate the resources?
Oh, no, 100%.
Yeah.
You need to allocate it. And 160, that's because we actually published the Drugs Committee report today, and that's why I think it's 161. But the same goes for that. Because I would also say, in relation to what that lady said, I think an awful lot of educationists have obviously moved away from the fact of children are better when it can be employed that you don't use screens, and it is better if you go back to book learning, and like we all know, we all know even from our own point of view, it impacts in relation to how much focus you can maintain. You spend 20 minutes on TikTok and then try to, remember what you were doing 10 minutes before that. It's like me trying to remember what point I'm trying to make here, and I've literally lost the ability to do that.
Can I just say to Alex's point, this is a massive public health issue, and we are not treating it as such. And if we were going to treat it as such, we would be investing, to Aidan's point, or allocating resources. But I look at CAMs, like I listen to Fiona, and having lived with a child protection social worker for half my life, is that our CAMS is completely under-resourced at this stage. And I fear what Deirdre says in terms of what will happen in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, when the reporting really comes in. And I know you don't want me to get into technicals, Noeline, but one thing about...
Because you'll embarrass me.
Well, one thing about Cleona's point about the racism when it comes to AI, it's there, and I wish Malcolm was here to listen to this point, is that I sit on the anti-racism advisory, and in the last 18 months alone, we have seen a sharp increase in racist behaviour. We have seen a sharp increase in racist reporting, and that is to do with AI and social media. So it is actually the lies being driven online, but also generated by AI chatbots, is unforgiving. Yet at the same time, it's not viewed as a priority, because what the government has received is information that, oh, you put data in, that's what it gives out. That's not how it works.
Yeah. So it is that the harms were there already, the racism, the discrimination was there already. Artificial intelligence can really amplify that. Sorry, so Aidan,
Just if I could add one bit, certainly in agreement with what colleagues have said. I think the bit that we shouldn't overshadow either is when Liz spoke about that kind of FOMO piece, and that keeping up with the next door neighbour or having some sort of common agreement. There needs to be a national conversation, I think, about what is an acceptable time for children and young people to start this. And I think if we overshadow that with ban and ban only, as it's the latest moral panic facing children and young people, then if everything looks like a nail, we're gonna have a hammer if that's all we have. But I think that's not. I don't know if that's political leadership necessarily either, and I don't know if it's going to be something that you can legislate for when suddenly your children's friends are starting to have phones, they're starting to open YouTube accounts, they're starting to do this, that, and the other, and that pressure is real. Do you know, as a parent, that pressure is really real, and then the evolution just starts from there. And I just don't know how we can progress that, but I think it's very, very important.
So in the Alliance, when we're working and with colleagues around, we see what we're doing is seeing it as a triangle. You have your policymakers, your legislators at one apex, you have your tech companies who are required to behave corporately responsibly in a second, and you have society in a third, where we lose this sense that it was all a magic illusion and try and come to terms with it, and powerless to do something with it. Fiona.
I just want to reaffirm that it is definitely a big public health issue, and I think that it also leans towards another public health issue which I see on the doors a lot, which is loneliness, and I think that it is fueling an epidemic of loneliness, not just for children and disconnecting them from their friends, but also the time that we fall into our phones and don't go visiting people or calling around to people, and I think that it is isolating us, and then when we're isolated and not quite like leaning into the vulnerability, but then people find their tribes online, and it is fueling us with nasty tribes online to feel that sense of belonging. And I really think our sense of community and connection and belonging needs to be part of our public health discourse as well as this. I think it's absolutely a public health issue. I hope all that makes sense.
And building, and I think that was a big part of the recommendations as well, building awareness, losing the ignorance of what we're looking at and building better responsibility. I am inclined to feel that we should leave it at that unless there are any other burning but short questions. Sorry, I'm being pointed at. Where? Sorry. Comments are even better. Oh, sorry, yeah, okay. So who else do we have? Can you put your hands up, please? Yeah. Right, oh, sorry, yeah. Do you have to, if you don't mind me saying so, Sharon and Mick, because you made a comment already? All right, but anyway, look, we'll go ahead, please.
Okay, I'll try to be very fast. Yeah. Hello, Epi with Youth Work Ireland.
Yes.
I think my first comment would be, I feel like we need to separate social media and AI because those are two distinct entities. And I'll use an example with different effects, right, which require different legislation and solutions. Like I'll use the issue around misinformation and disinformation. Social media allows you to spread misinformation and disinformation. And you can use that's when we can say, oh, if we have critical analysis, you can counter that, right? Whereas AI allows you to create misinformation. It allows you to create evidence for that misinformation. So those are two separate things that would require different levels of engagement and different forms of legislation, right? And then my question would be, I work for a youth work organization, and do policymakers and government officials actually care about what young people have to say? Because I feel like we do consult young people, we do ask them, they give us responses, they give us answers, but no one seems to care.
All right, that's a good question. Thank you. Can I maybe take Sharon and Mick a short point, if you don't mind, and then that will be our final contributors from the floor.
Thank you. Sharon O'Neill, Cork Life Centre. First of all, my brain is slightly broken at the irony of having to explain the word sandbox in this conversation and its use in this conversation. My children had a sandbox growing up. That was their play-based childhood. We talk about fluency and literacy, and Malcolm was very quick to throw out the word competency. We need to be very careful not to assume that just because our young people are fluent, and we might be or consider ourselves literate, does not mean that we are in any way competent. And by that I mean that we have an understanding of what's being done with the inputs and how to interpret the outputs when it comes to AI. I am concerned about the introduction of the use of the word vulnerable when we're talking about children. We need to protect all our children, not just the vulnerable ones. All of our children need to be protected. And finally, just to come back to Paul's question, when we're talking about what are the things that we actually need to do, I think, Deputy Farrelly, I think you actually hit the nail on the head. As a youth worker, I would expect you to. I recently had an inspection by the child safeguarding representative of our patrons, and he came down and he went through every single thing. Is my child safeguarding statement displayed? What are my policies and procedures? How is my vetting? What's my recruitment like? What's my record keeping like? And what we need to do is we need to take that lens and all of those individual elements of what child protection is in person, and we need to translate them into what does that look like online? What does vetting look like
and Sharon,
online?
That doesn't exist, right? No.
And that's where we need to start. It's the only thing we need to do, and it's back to holding them accountable in the CE mark, which I brought up online the last time.
Thank you very much indeed. I think actually all children are regarded as vulnerable because of their state of development, simply, sorry, Mick,
I welcome the fact that there are human rights assessments to be carried out at, that's in various different legislative frameworks. Is there any reason why a child rights assessment cannot be carried out by these companies when they are aiming products at children or can be used by children?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So that's, I think the question of consultation, Epi, bothers us all from time to time. We feel good doing them, and then what actually happens them along the way. Yeah. So, can I ask the four of you, Ruairí? Thank you.
Well, look, we're obviously not the government. So
But you
so I can give out that they're the problem, okay? And they're gone because they just didn't care enough to listen to you, right? No, look, in fairness, even to Ciara and the committee, we went through probably in dealing with a number of issues, and it was child poverty, and obviously we were dealing with, you know, the idea of online safety. And reports are being written up on the basis of what the young people said to us. And in fairness, it probably, because I get sometimes you can go through the motions on this stuff, but I have to say it was really worthwhile. First of all, it was personal experience in relation to how they were impacted, how their friends were impacted. And then even beyond that, it was their view of, there are issues here, but I couldn't not be on Snapchat, or otherwise I would be missing out on a huge element of connectivity with my friends, and even friends that I wouldn't have only for this. While now, and sometimes you're talking with people who are obviously willing to go in front of committee, and they're really up for it. They're actually a lot better than I am in relation to critical analysis, and they have a huge level of resilience. I know one young lad, and he was up and he started talking about, I remember I kept getting added to groups from a point of view so I could get a bit bullied, but it never really bothered me a whole pile. Like, I just ignored them and moved on. I'm not sure that would be the case in every situation and circumstance. So from the committee's point of view, I can say, are there committees that I've sat on that have dealt with this? I think we have engaged. And I get, you're not talking to every young person. You're talking to the young people that you get, and you get connected through groups. But I have to say, I found it really useful. And I've also been on committees at times when you've had interactions with young people where you have just gone through the motions. No, but I've seen some really, really worthwhile interactions that have happened. But again, the government are to blame.
Thank you very much, Fiona.
I have a master's degree in human rights and citizenship, and the framework that we use to frame children's voices was your space, voice, audience, and influence. And it sounds like the space and the voice and the audience is there, but the influence is the part that's possibly not planned for and executed correctly. And then I would just wonder, to lean into the comments there, just to make sure that when we are looking for consultation, and I'm not in Leinster House yet, that we have a broad spectrum of people, of young children and adults, or my goodness, I'm not going there now, not today. A broad range of people participating into that audience, so they can feed into that audience. But I really think the fourth part of that is the influence, and that's really key to any successful engagement or a consultation process.
And can I just ask you then, just with your human rights background as well, in terms of Mick's question, Mick, I wasn't actually saying they were doing human rights assessments, just that there are agencies like the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission and the Ombudsman for Children and the General Ombudsman set up as fundamental human rights agencies that should be engaged in this. So what do you say? Because we in the Children's Rights Alliance say it's relatively easy to work out what is the best interests of children, what non-discrimination looks like if you do a child rights impact assessment. So, but they're never done by government. It's government policy that they be done, but they're not being done, so.
He was looking for it done by actually the social media companies.
Oh, by the social media for the risk assessment. Oh, yeah. A child rights impact,
For companies who wish
a child rights impact assessment would be a prerequisite to. So Fiona, sorry, just a second.
I was just going to comment on that and to who's at the table, because if the big companies are making those decisions and they're the ones deciding it, it's not really a collaborative process. Oh, sorry, did I miss the point? I'm sorry, Mick. Sorry.
No, I think that you're right.
I think I misunderstood.
But a proper
legislate to make it happen.
A proper assessment would mean you'd have to. Okay. Hazel.
I think we need to start getting really angry about this stuff. I'm sorry, but whenever change has happened in this country, if you look at women's health with repeal, if you look at marriage referendum, it's when we got properly angry, then something happened. And yes, you look at legislators, you think, oh, regulation will be bound to happen. But legislators sit there and in many cases think of things like foreign direct investment, think of, well, job values, and they don't put public policy and public health first, and that's the problem. And I think as parents, definitely, I have a child. I know many parents in my school are getting angry, but I think we need to get properly angry because this isn't something that's going away, and it's been something that has continuously developed. And I think there needs to be a proper civil society campaign to push legislators, especially coming into locals, coming into generals. What are you doing, and what is your party doing when it comes to safety online?
Okay, thank you. Ruairí, do you want to make a comment at this stage? I'll take one from Aidan as well, and then...
I was just making sure that... I was utilising my phone to its full capacity. No, I was just making sure that I actually was speaking on this tonight. So, so on the Ashlyn app, you know what I mean, which I wouldn't like to see taken off the phone in any way, shape or form. No, and in fairness, look, I think this has been really useful. I would say that anyway. Now, in fairness, some of it's a reinforcement of what we already know, the abject, absolute failings in relation to the controls are needed with social media. We all get the dangers in relation to artificial intelligence, and where the two meet is an incredibly dangerous place. And I get that we don't know where artificial intelligence will bring us. I have no doubt of the innovations that are there alongside the dangers around displacement and all those other dangers like job displacement and all them other issues we have dealt with. But I think we have a fundamental problem in relation to the impact that social media is having on society, the issue it's having on politics, and probably even what we've seen in England in the last while. As somebody said, politics was always a rough game. It just happens at a greater speed now. And due to the fact that social media can turn on a person, forget the rights and wrongs of it, it's just phenomenal, the impact. It's phenomenal, the issue that can suddenly become an issue on a week-by-week basis, that could literally be from some person who doesn't have any sort of mandate or anything, but just happens to be able to sell a particular idea that crosses across the board, and then suddenly we're inundated not only with social media posts, but also with emails and all the rest of it, you know, and it's something we all have to be very careful about. We have to be very careful in relation to protecting democracy, but first and fundamentally, we have an issue in relation to how this is impacting and how children are growing up, the impact it is having on their brains, and if we, you know, and we do not know what the long-term impacts are, but we will have failed miserably if we do not put some sort of checks and balances, and we do not put some sort of guardrails, and we don't hold the social media companies to account. Because really, like I said earlier, it's all about they're only interested in making money. It's not even that they're doing this on the basis of they want to do harm. They just don't care, and we need to accept that. And as much as we will worry about taxation, we will worry about the tax take that this state takes, but we in Ireland, and then on a global basis, and even at a European and global basis, we are going to be in a very, very dangerous place into the future, having done much harm to our children. And again, we will, I don't even know what sort of commission you would need to look at that, unless we get to grips with this.
Yeah. And it's not just social media, it's much bigger now than the
of
tech
course
industry.
It is.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that. I think that's Aidan.
Just very, very quickly, to support that point, I think that's what makes the ban the wrong approach, because the companies that have been before us in committee, and they rely solely on internal policies and procedures. They're not interested in anything else.
Yes.
They're not going to change their economic model unless they absolutely have to.
Yes.
And a ban will only underwrite the fact that, well, if we've nobody under 16 on our platform, then why would we ever do a children's rights assessment to the non-existent users?
Exactly, or even put safety measures in place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And secondly, I think we have a political window here, and I think if the ban goes through, this is going to go off the political agenda for a significant period of time to allow that to progress, and then we do our research reports 1 year, 2 year, 3 years to see how that's working before any other solution is even considered. That's why I think, and just no, young people's voices aren't meaningfully consulted in Leinster House or ever evidenced in policy at all.
Oh dear. And on that depressing note, no, I mean, thank you very much. If it's all right with you, I will close the conversation here. I will thank you all very, very much indeed. You are really great to give this the time and thought that you gave it, to Fiona Connelly from Labour, to Hazel Chu of the Green Party, Ruairí Ó Murchú of Sinn Féin, Aidan Farrelly of Social Democrats, Ciara Keogh of Fine Gael, I'm pointing to the seats where they're not anymore, Malcolm Byrne of Fianna Fáil, yes, and Paul Murphy of People Before Profit. I mean, it's an awful lot of time and thought that they've given to this, and I do think they were a fantastic panel. Just one more little round of applause for them. Yeah. And thank you for putting up with the sort of I don't know, incoherent cheering that went on. But look, you're grand. Thank you very much to the audience, to all of you for being here. It is a lovely warm afternoon. We will let you go in a minute, but it was great. And thank you all for your engagement. Thank you very much to all of the Children's Rights Alliance team who put this show together. It's not easy. They did amazing work. Led by our CEO, Tanya Ward, and by our communications and campaign team, or is it campaigns and communication? Which way it doesn't matter. Communications and campaigns team, Emma Archbold and Gillian Hogan, who were the sort of stars who kept checklisting us about every day, really, for a while to check everything was going well. So thank you very much. Listen, we're not finished with this. This is something where even the speed of submissions, at one stage, we were working on report cards, and I said to Naomi Feely, Naomi, we will put in our information for a report card, and it would be published a week later. And I said, I promise you it will be out of date in relation to online safety by the time we put it in. And it turned out to be the case. She's from Tipperary, so I'm loud said, you know, that I'm crowing a little bit over that, because so am I. So it is very fast moving, but there are some core principles, and it's clear we know what they are. It's just, how do you keep the political sort of backbone and will, all of us, to keep going in the face of the biggest, most powerful, transnational industry that the world has ever seen? That's not easy, and there is no silver bullet, but there are bits of solutions that all of us can contribute to. And thank you very much indeed, all of you, for being here and for hearing that. And Emma, am I done? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.